Welcome to Health, Wealth, Wisdom Parents Edition Super Summit. Your host for this session is Patrice Porter. She is the creator of programs such as Got Dirt, Gardening for Kids, and Fabulous Family Futures. She is also a #1 best-selling author. Welcome your super host, Patrice.
Well, welcome. And our first speaker for the day is Rosemary Olender. And I'm so happy you're here to share with us today, Rosemary. Rosemary has a background in education and consulting, and she is a speaker and an author of a couple of books. The School-Home Connection, Forging Positive Relationship with Parents, and Coffee and Wisdom, A Father's Legacy to Leading a Rich Life. And I know that book holds the message that she's going to share with us today about the importance of those non-material gifts that we can pass on to our kids. And her talk is Put Away Your Wallet and Raise Rich Kids. So Rosemary, welcome, and let us know a little bit about yourself and why it's so important for people to start to turn the focus more on those non-material gifts.
Good morning. It's nice to be here. My background is in education. I started out as a teacher of the profoundly deaf, I'm a speech pathologist, and then I went into regular ed teaching, administration, and then director of special education for many, many years. After I retired, which I didn't really do, I started to do consultant work around the state of New York with families and teachers and educators about family structures and how to have better relationships between school and home, and even some advocacy for disabled kids regarding the law and the laws that protect them in their educational process. So having done all of that, I retired, and then COVID came along. And after COVID, or during COVID, I had the chance to really think back on something that I had been mulling over for a long time. A long time ago, my father passed away, and the night before he died, he said to me, I have to apologize to you and your sister and your mother for leaving you with nothing. And it shook me because I had no idea what he was talking about. And I said, I know you're sick, but do you not understand how rich we are as a family, how rich we are as individuals because of you and all the gifts you have given us? And he said, what are you talking about? He was focusing on material wealth. He was focusing on the fact that we were a lower middle class family, and he didn't own his car. He never owned a new car. We didn't own our house. He had a business that kept us afloat most of the time, and he couldn't figure out what I was talking about. So I took the time, thankfully, and spent some time telling him, okay, these are the gifts. And out of that conversation came the book, Coffee and Wisdom, A Father's Legacy to Leading a Rich Life. My dad and I had a ritual my entire life. From as early as I can remember. I can remember being a toddler. And at night, I would sit with him at the kitchen table and we would have milk. I would have milk then and cookies. And as I got older, I graduated to coffee at age 12 and boxes of cookies. And we would spend time talking every single night. And that's where his mentorship came from. Because we would reflect on and talk about the day, and we would talk about what we had seen on television. We would talk about anything that was upsetting or anything that was really joyous that made me really happy. And so the book is about the non-material things that kids really need to grow up to be resilient and to be happy and strong and successful and motivated to go after whatever they want to go after. So the book is set up so that each chapter is a different gift. And I talk about why that particular gift is important. We all know that kids need love and they need acceptance. That's a given. Everybody understands that. And and parents show that in different ways. I had a conversation with a friend recently, and she said to me, my father never said the words, I love you. I'm not, and I said, and she seemed sad about that. And I said, well, what did he do to show you he loved you? And she said, well, I don't know. And I said, well, think about it. So we had a whole conversation about that. Um, because even divorced situations, there are ways for both parties to show love in a lot of different times and in a lot of different ways. So I talk about why each gift is important. And then the next section of each chapter is stories, reflections of my life and what my father did to show the gift of humor. Let's take that one. My father had a wonderful sense of humor and sometimes an annoying sense of humor, but he loved life and he loved to laugh. And so I talk about all the things that he did and the stories I heard, like the one where he and my uncle needed to wash my uncle's brand new car, and the city had put a ban on using water because there was a drought. And so my father had the bright idea, let's go down to the river and we'll just use river water and we'll just, wash off some of the dust and stuff. And while they were there, my uncle had forgotten to put the emergency brake on the car and it rolled into the river. Well, my father just fell to the ground laughing. He just laughed, and as they told the story, both my uncle and he are laughing. My uncle wanted to kill him at first, but then he got laughing. And my father said, you know, I own a gas station. We'll tow the thing out. We'll dry it off. It'll be fine. And that's the kind of thing he did. So there are stories there. And then the next section after the stories are suggestions for parents. Here are some things you could do to infuse humor into your family, into your lives. I'm sure there's a lot there, but just some other ideas to say, oh, yeah, we could do that, or we could do that. So that's essentially how the book is set up. Over the years, as a teacher and as an administrator, I realized that parents, many, many parents, felt that they were not giving their kids what they needed. Either they didn't have money and so they couldn't buy them the newest iPhone, they couldn't get them the bike that they wanted. Um, I grew up that way. We didn't have that kind of money to get that kind of stuff. Later on, maybe, but early on, and I never felt cheated. I never felt, and I had to think about that. Why was that? What did my dad do? So, this is about taking small moments in your lives with your kids and making them special, making them extraordinary moments. Um, Over the years, I had teachers who did that very thing. They would take something so small, and turn it into something the kids will never forget. I had a group of students one time in junior high school, boys, that were just incorrigible, and they were ninth graders, and they were in my office a lot. And they would come in the front door, and then they would go out the back door, and skip classes, but to they would always come back to their seventh period class and then leave again. And I was like, so I had them in my office and I'm like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? Why are you coming back? Oh, we wouldn't miss Mr. G's class. We wouldn't want him to be disappointed in us. And I'm like, why? And I was relatively new to the school. So I decided to figure it out. So one day, I went up to that class and I opened the door, and there was the teacher on top of a desk, hip hopping to a song he had written about grammar, what the verb does, and it was like, okay, I get it now. These kids do not want to miss this, and they did well in that class. So that was just one example. And I see that with parents. And we're so busy now that parents are working one job, two jobs, three jobs. They're not around. And the biggest obstacle parents report a lot of the time is time. There's not enough time in the day. And what I say to that is make some time, even if it's only 5 minutes, and make it a ritual. 5 minutes in the morning or 5 minutes at night, so that your kids are grounded and they get to see what's going on and they get to count on it. At first, they might resist, especially teenagers. I don't have the time. I got to go to school. You have the time for this. I want you to think about three things that excite you in school today and come home and tell me. That's it. But engage with them. And that was so critical for so many parents. And I had parents start to do that and kids starting to say, my daddy talks to me now. Because you're rushing and you're getting breakfast and you're going out the door and you're not thinking about it. And the other thing that when I reflect back on my life, the other thing my father did from when and I can remember it from when I was little, he would always smile big when I walked in the room. Not just a little smile, but his smile would reach his eyes. And that always said to me, oh, you're here. You're important to me. Even if it was only a 5-minute conversation. So having had this conversation with my dad, and I'm glad I had the opportunity to say to him, yes, and he could go understanding how much he gave us, which was so important. I would encourage families to do the same. Talk to each other about, you don't have to, you don't have to say the words, I love you, unless you can get comfortable with that. But, my father always had his arm around people, hugging people, talking to them, putting his hand on my shoulder, tucking me in bed at night, all of the little things. What I realized it's the small moments where our riches lie. That's what we
Yeah.
remember.
Yeah. And we've got a few more minutes. Can you just in these last bits, can you give maybe run over a few of those gifts that were in your book and the suggestions that parents can do to
Yes,
bring about
sure.
those gifts?
And one of the things that people can get today is a tip sheet from me, which is 10 tips that are sort of little suggestions. But, time and presence. The 3 pillars, I started to think about the 3 pillars of parenting really are active listening, not just, okay, I'm reading, I'm on my phone, I'm listening, and kids know you're not listening. It's put the phone down, turn around and say, okay, talk to me. Even if it's 3 minutes, it's 3 important minutes. So active listening is key. Focused observation, really watch, really look at your kids and see what they're doing and comment. That was a great thing you built there. It boosts self-confidence. One of the chapters in the book is on ethics and integrity, just explaining why if you get the wrong change at a cash register, you acknowledge it and you give it back, why that's important to do. And there are stories in the book about things like that and how my father showed those things. Patience, having patience. Kids can try your patience. Adults can too, but kids
We
can
all
really
know that.
try. Yeah, kids can really try your patience. And sometimes they're going and going and going and going and going. And you just have to listen patiently. And then full presence and participation in their lives, even if you only have an hour a day, if you have 10 minutes a day, make sure it's a real connection between you and your child, for sure.
Yeah.
And then one of the gifts in the book is positive risk taking. My father believed that taking risks is a learning opportunity as long as the risk doesn't involve anyone getting hurt or, it isn't anything illegal. But he encouraged me to start a business I knew nothing about at one time, my husband and I. And he said, what have you got to lose? And I said, well, money for one thing. And he said, well, can you afford to lose that much money? And we said, well, yeah. And he said, then do it. Then do it. Just don't put more in. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Figure out why it didn't work. And he always would go through with us our failures. Why do you think it failed? What could you have done differently? Those kinds of things. So I just would encourage families and anyone caretaking children, educators, teachers, to tread carefully, because you have the power to make or break a child. And with your words, with your actions, with your behavior. Children watch behavior. And if they see bad behavior, then why should they not behave like that? Especially if it's a parent or a teacher or whatever, you know. And my dad used to say, behavior depends a lot on where the person has come from. And wouldn't it be great if all of us had little signs on our foreheads that told everybody out there what had just happened to us and why we were behaving the way we were? Like, I just got a bad diagnosis medically, or, my cat died last night, those kinds of things, because then we would maybe think a little differently and talk about that, talk about why that person might have been feeling that way. And you can do it with books, you can do it with television shows. Stop it and say, why do you think she behaved that way? Those are the kinds of discussions my dad and I used to have all the time.
Well, I'm just amazed, and you are so fortunate to have a father like that. And as I
Yeah,
say that, he left you with all sorts of riches there,
he did.
and and I'm hoping that people will pick up some of those tips. I know I just in myself here, it's like, yeah, you know, make that time with your kids, that schedule it. Like it's so easy to just get caught up in your busy life, but no, this is the time set aside for my child, and that you can really be there, present, and you did put your, do you want to tell a little bit more about that gift that you had? They
Yes,
did put,
it's called 10 parent tip sheet for parents, raising children with heart, legacy, and love. And basically, it's just 10 quick ideas for them to mull over and ponder. Things like, um, make time, not just rules. Kids need structure. They do. They absolutely need structure. But presence, your presence is a superpower. People say to me, of all these things in your book, what's the best thing your father gave you? And I say, himself, his time.
yeah,
He gave me him. I was
yeah.
so fortunate with that. And so is my sister. And we're 13 years apart. She started
Wow.
kindergarten the day I started college. So we grew up with family circumstances being similar but very different. And yet,
Wow.
he gave her the same set of gifts and more. And there are more. I mean, I came up with these 12. I'm sure I can do 12 more, but uh, yeah,
So,
it's so important. And I think the tip
the
sheet will get you started. And I'm working on possibly doing some coaching
so
with
you
families.
had a VIP gift too that you were
Not
offering to,
today. I haven't been able to
okay.
get it off the ground, but I'm working on it. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
there, if folks want to get the recording, you can pick up the VIP package, and that will give you the all the recordings and all extra special gifts that on top of those for just attending and registering. And the link was put in again in the chat. And once more, I'll mention about our foundations for optimal beginnings that help more folks around the world to have that optimal beginning. And there's a QR code there. That's the nonprofit organization. And the more we can do to help families thrive and make better futures for us all. And if there's any questions from the audience there. Do you have a tip, maybe, Rosemary? I know, like myself, like sometimes if your relationship hasn't been that great with your kids, maybe, and what's some ways to kind of make that breakthrough and just
Are you
you
talking adult kids? You talking teenagers in the house, out of the house?
uh let's say with your teenagers, let's say like maybe you've just
The
haven't
biggest
had that great of relationship, but
Yeah,
you want.
the biggest issue with teenagers is they're busy and they don't think we have much to give them, and they're busy with their friends and they're doing all of that. And so there's a break in the connection. You have to find the ways to, I found, for one thing, that you can learn from your kids. It's not just the other way around. They can be your teacher too. And I think sometimes with teens, if you can engage them in what they are the most interested in, even if it's something that doesn't interest you at all. Like my grandson was very into rap, and it's not something I even like, but I engaged in a conversation about it. Where did it come from? Why do you like it so much? What are your favorite rappers? That kind of stuff. You have to sort of make the connection first on their turf, and then set up stuff and say, have a cup of, my dad would say, come on, just sit and have a cup of coffee with me. Then it got to be a routine where I would miss it if it wasn't there. To the day he died, we talked at night. Even the night before he passed, at 8 o'clock, we were talking. And when he was sick and I was away, we talked on the phone. So in the book, there's a thing in the back of the book that I wrote the summer before he passed away about our conversations over coffee, which was going to be the first title of the title I was going to use, Conversations Over Coffee. And then I thought, no, it's more than that. So, but I would
Yeah.
say, yeah, you have to make the personal connection so they want to talk with you.
Okay, we've got a couple of questions coming in here. Uh, do you have suggestions for anxious parents to introduce a question or problem they have concerning their child to their child's teacher while keeping the parent's sphere of influence as primary?
Say that one more time.
Okay. Do you have suggestions for anxious parents
Yeah.
to introduce a question or problem they have concerning their child to their child's
Mhm.
teacher, while keeping the parent's sphere of influence as primary?
Um, so the fear of influence, I'm not sure I understand that, but I can tell you that as a teacher, I always appreciated a conversation with a parent and respected their privacy and respected their position in the child's life. But it's important for them to be open and honest and just lay out their fears. Just lay out what your fear is. I'm afraid of this, 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 and this. And my daughter had to do that with two of her kids who were um, special needs kids. And I would say, just go in and just explain all of that. And she would be afraid that somehow it would negatively impact the kid. And I can tell you, in all of the years that I was in the schools, 40 plus, teachers didn't. I won't say there was never a teacher who did that, but it was few and far between. Um, and I think the teacher needs to know and understand where the parent's coming from and where the kid is coming from so that they can fix some things. We had a kid who was on the spectrum who the only thing he cared about was turtles, and the mother was terrified that he was not going to make it in the classroom. What the third grade teacher did when he entered her classroom was she did a science unit on turtles. She set the
Aw.
whole room up around turtles because the mother had said the only thing he really cares about is turtles and he's a behavior problem otherwise. She's like, okay, let's fix this. So she took that little conversation and made it into a huge, impactful unit that lasted long enough for him to become more comfortable with the kids in the class and with the teacher. and get off to a smoother start than he might otherwise not. Had that mother not told the teacher how his behavior was a problem and her concern about it, and she was anxious about it fitting in, that never would have happened. So
Well, thank
honesty.
you, Rosemary. That's a wonderful suggestion. And there was, I hope you read in the comments, there's a comment about your book that it is very transformative. And so thank you, Rosemary. That was wonderful. And so many gems you shared with us. And I think it'll really can make a difference in folks' lives.
Well, thank you for having me. It was great.
From the Health, Wealth, and Wisdom Parents Edition. For the recordings of all sessions, plus an amazing VIP bundle, upgrade to VIP now. If you run into any problems during the summit, email our support team at admin@rolemodelmaker.com. Stay tuned. We have another fantastic guest coming right up.